So welcome, my name is Kelly Robinson. I'm the Director of Total Rewards over in the Human Resources Department at Wellesley. And I oversee the benefits and compensation for administrative staff and also our technology systems that we use through Workday, obviously, to help kind of administer all of our different programs that we offer. Today we're going to go through some benefits and compensations considerations to think about when you're looking for a job. So this is what we're going to cover. We're going to go through some medical terms that would be helpful for you to kind of get a better understanding. Deciding what medical plan to go with is certainly something that is custom to each person, right? So we'll talk a little bit about things to think about and look for. We'll look at some perks and other employee benefits that you might want to consider when you're looking at roles. We'll go through retirement plan benefits and compensation terms and just some things to think about when you're getting an offer. Okay, so the medical terms. So these are just kind of words that you're going to hear that, throughout your decisions when you're looking at insurance, when you're going to the doctor, if you're calling the insurance company. Provider is a hospital, a doctor, any kind of healthcare provider is really, that's what you're going to hear that word, provider. And it's really like your doctor. Your dentist could be a provider. The insured is the person who carries the health insurance. So that's typically the person who holds the insurance. They may have dependents that they cover as well on their own plan. The premium is the amount of the cost really that the insurance company will charge for the health care. And then the employers kind of figure out how much of that cost the employer is going to cover and how much the employee is going to be responsible for. So that varies by every organization. And then the copay is a fixed amount that you might pay when you actually use the services. So if you go to the doctor, if you have an ear infection, they may ask for your copay at the point of service. And that's what that is. It might be, it depends what plan you're in, and we'll go through some information about different plans that are out there. But if you're in an HMO plan, for example, they might ask you for a $20 copay for a sick visit. Okay.
Sorry, can we go back?
Yeah.
You said we can ask questions during?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. When you say pre-tax basis, can you go over what that means?
Good question. Yes. So the amount that you pay as an employee that comes out of your paycheck if you enroll in the health insurance or dental insurance, there's an IRS rule that allows the organization to take that money out before taxes. So you don't pay taxes on that cost. So a majority of organizations will have a pre-tax option and will really default employees into the pre-tax option, so you don't pay taxes on that premium. Good question. Okay. So the deductible, not every health plan has a deductible, but a lot of plans out there these days do. And we're going to talk through what a PPO plan is, but it's the amount that you might have to pay before the plan pays. So your plan might have a $500 deductible, which means that the first $500 in healthcare costs you spend, you're going to pay that out of pocket, and then the plan may pick up 80% of the cost of your care beyond that. Yeah, lower deductibles are generally associated with higher premiums. What that means is that if your deductible is only $200, it's likely that the cost that you're paying per paycheck is going to be more for the coverage. So you're going to pay a little bit more every paycheck, but you'll have less out-of-pocket costs. And then co-insurance is your share of the costs. And again, not all plans have this. Some plans have this, but it's your share of the costs. That's typically in a percentage. So like I just said, your deductible might be $500, and then the insurance carrier, the co-insurance, is 80%, which means the healthcare plan is going to pay 80%, and you're going to pay 20% of the cost. Okay, out-of-pocket maximum. So This is the most that most plans have an out-of-pocket maximum, and what it means is it's the most that you're ever going to have to pay out of your own pocket in a calendar year or plan year towards your costs for health insurance. It's typically pretty high, so it might be $5,000, it might be $10,000 for the year, but it's some sort of protection that you have if you have like, a terrible medical expense year, it's helpful to know there's some kind of cap there to protect you. Preventative, and most people don't ever reach it. Majority of people don't ever hit that. Yes?
I have a question. So I know that like in the news, sometimes we hear about like pregnant women going in to give birth and then are left with like a $20,000 bill for receiving that.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're saying that like most of the time your out-of-pocket maximum might be, let's say, like $5,000, then like how is it that there's that discrepancy?
So you have to. So I'm wondering. I don't know for sure, but what I'm thinking it might be is if they're not covered under an insurance plan, then then they may then there is no limit to what the providers can charge, or what the hospital can charge. It could also be a plan that you pay a very, very small amount for per month, but it has a really high limit. It has a really high out-of-pocket maximum, so it could be one situation or the other. The plans that I've seen and when folks are enrolled in insurance plans, and I've worked in a lot of other industries, and they're not, normally people don't come close to reaching their out-of-pocket maximum, which is good, yeah. And then it's also good to know that preventative care is covered, so your annual wellness visit with your primary care physician under the ACA is covered at 100%. So if you ever go in just for your regular physical, you want to make sure you're not paying a copay or any kind of cost for that. Some of the testing that your doctor might ask for you to do, some additional blood work, those kinds of things, those you might end up paying for, and they're not covered under ACA, but typically the general, annual physical is, so that's important to know. And the providers now at this point have cleaned up their billing systems and have incorporated that law under all of their plans. When it first was rolled out, however, though, there was a lot of confusion in billing. And so we kept having to remind people, make sure you don't pay for that copay for your physical. Yeah.
Was this kind of like regardless of what plan you're under, it should be 100%?
It should be,
you're
yeah,
under a
generally.
plan?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So, thinking about how you figure out what plan might be best for you. And these are just some things to consider. And there's so many organizations out there with different health plans, different carriers, and they're all set up a little bit differently. So these are really general things to think about. One is that you may be able to remain on a parent's plan up until you're age 26. So you would want to check with, if you are currently covered under your parent's plan, to what age will they allow coverage, and typically it's 26. So that's the first thing I think most people check. And then if that's the case and that works, then that's one option. The other thing you want to think about is how much choice do you want in the doctors that you see? So are you kind of somebody who just has one primary care physician and really doesn't go very often and isn't looking for choice when it comes to specialists? Or would you really rather know that, gosh, if something happens, I want to be able to go to the best knee surgeon and kind of have that flexibility to find a wide range of doctors? That's something to think about. And this is where I kind of get into the projected number of doctor visits. And so we'll talk a little bit about that when we talk about the HMO versus kind of a high deductible plan and PPO, so we'll get to that in a second. And then prescriptions. So, that's something that when you're looking at plans, you'll want to look at what the prescription coverage is and just, have a good understanding of how the prescription coverage works and what the copays are. Mail order tends to be a way that you can save. So if you have a prescription you take every month, often you can save money by ordering it in a 90-day supply and having it shipped to your house. So there's Prescription carriers too are also now, there's a lot of different coupons out there. There's a lot of ways to save with prescription coverage. You have to go digging a little bit depending on who your carrier is to try to find them, but there are definitely more savings available than there were in the past, which is great. And then we kind of talked about this a little bit, but think about, would you rather pay more from each paycheck in premiums and know that you have a richer health plan that will cover you if you need it? Or are you okay kind of paying a little bit less, per pay period and know, if I get sick, if something happens, that I might have to pay a little bit more at the time. And that's just something to think about, personal choice. So this is kind of a just general description of an HMO plan. So for the HMO plans, you're really kind of limited to this network of doctors that the HMO covers. And so one of the first things to look at is if you really like your primary care physician, do they accept that coverage? Are they in the network? Where we are in this area, there's definitely a broad HMO networks, and a lot of places have quite a few doctors in the kind of HMO network. So it doesn't necessarily mean that there's not that many doctors to choose from. It's just understanding the ones that you might want to see and whether or not they're in the network. Generally, HMO's plans do not cover any out-of-network care. So if you are in an HMO plan and you decide to see a specialist and they're not in the network, and you kind of didn't do the research ahead of time, unfortunately, the insurance carrier is probably not going to pay it. If it's an emergency situation, if you're traveling and you're in another state and something happens, that's a different story. You will want to call your insurance carrier right away, but they will typically cover an emergency expense. And then the HMO plans require you to pick a primary care physician, so that is a requirement. And then the primary care will typically provide you with referrals if you want to see a specialist. So that's kind of the process that the health plan follows under an HMO plan. So you've got a network of doctors, you get your primary care. If you want to see a specialist, you call your primary care, and they'll provide you a referral. Any questions on that, please? Yes.
So would the PCP then always refer you to like someone in your network?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. You'll want to remind them,
Okay.
but remind them what plan you're in, because every patient has a different plan. That's a good point. But yes, they'll be able to do that. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So a PPO plan. So the PPO plans allow more flexibility when it comes to provider choice. So it's not this kind of smaller network where you can't go to out-of-network providers. You definitely have more freedom. And there's typically more coverage if you travel, if you are out of state, there's typically more coverage for that situation too. Let's see, and then, your copay and deductibles will be lower if you pick somebody in the network, but there is typically some out-of-network care when you go with a PPO plan. It also doesn't require you to have a primary care physician. I'm not sure, it's still helpful to have a primary care physician, and I think important to have a connection with a primary care physician, but it's not a requirement. And then if you want to see a specialist, you can do search online to figure out what specialists take the PPO plan, and you can actually reach out to the specialist directly. You don't have to go through primary care and get a specialist referral. So the process is different when you're scheduling appointments. And certainly, if there is coverage under a PPO plan for out-of-network, you're definitely going to pay more when you go out of any network, whether it's a PPO or HMO. Yes.
Why would it be more expensive?
Because they have financial agreements with their network of doctors. So there might be a broader network for the PPO plan, but then there's some doctors who do not have a contract at all with an insurance carrier, and so the insurance carrier is they'll cover a portion of the cost, but they're not gonna cover as much as a provider that had a full kind of contract with them.
So like HMO is more bound by like a certain state or region,
Yeah.
and PPO is like
Tends to be
a larger
broader.
network.
Yeah. So there's also a lot of plans out there called high deductible health plans. These have now been around for a while, and high deductible health plans are really essentially plans that have some sort of deductible, typically a deductible for individuals, and then if you have a family plan, it's a separate deductible. And the deductibles kind of range, so it might be a $1,000 deductible for an individual plan and a $3,000 for a family, or a $2,000 deductible for an individual. It's kind of, the range varies really. But again, going back to the term deductible, that means that all of your expenses that you incur, all of your healthcare expenses up until, let's say it's a $1,000 deductible, up until you meet $1,000 you're gonna pay out of your pocket. And then once you meet your deductible, then you're gonna have that robust coverage. So then a lot of plans, once you've met your deductible, and then you go to the office visit, you get an ear infection or something, you go to the doctor, it's covered in full. You don't pay anything. There's no copay or anything. So, you definitely have to be kind of prepared and ready to be able to spend money out of pocket in the beginning of the year, and then know that once you meet it, your costs are going to definitely decrease out of pocket if you use the plan. These plans typically also have lower premiums, so you pay less per month or per week from your paycheck for these plans. And so, it's something to think about. Some people never hit their deductible, so if they're only going to the doctor a couple of times a year, they're not reaching their deductible, and they probably saved money in their premiums by the end of the year. So certainly something to look at. There's something called a health savings account or a health reimbursement arrangement. Most plans have the HSA, the health savings account. And that plan is kind of coupled with these high deductible plans, and it allows you to set aside pre-tax money to use towards your out-of-pocket medical expenses. So you might be able to put aside, let's say $2,000 pre-tax over the course of the year, and then that money's in an account with a provider, and you can use that money. They often have like debit cards. You can use it as you go and pay your expenses, and you're using pre-tax dollars. So the benefit of it is the pre-tax dollars. So that money that's coming out of your paycheck, you're not taxed on, and you can pull it out of the account as long as you use it for eligible healthcare expenses. The other piece of that is that a lot of organizations might contribute to your HSA. So they'll provide a $500 contribution to this account, and then you can use that money to pay for your out-of-pocket expenses and kind of use that to pay towards the deductible. So I know that's a lot. That's a lot. Yes.
I guess if you're like kind of chronically ill or kind of tend to have a lot of prescriptions, like are high deductible health plans like generally not recommended, since like if you do end up going to more visits, like you kind of
so what you can do is you can actually kind of make an assumption that you're going to reach the deductible, and then you factor that in and add in the costs that you pay each week, the premiums that you're paying each week, and you look at what the total for that would be for the year, and then you add in the deductible. And oftentimes when you compare that amount to what you would pay in premiums for like an HMO plan or a more expensive plan, you're still in better shape with the high deductible plan, even if you hit the deductible. That's not everywhere, so it's really that's more of a suggestion to compare what your annual cost is for the premium, add in the deductible, add in if there's any employer contributions to an HSA, and sometimes you actually save money, and you might save more because once you've met the deductible, you're not paying for co-pays and like for physical therapy or allergist appointments, or those are really expensive appointments, and you're not paying for them once you've hit your deductible. So it's definitely it takes time to kind of look through those details, to make a determination. Yes?
So with the health savings account, is that like money that you can accrue over your entire lifetime, or as long as you have like that insurance plan versus the deductible, which resets like at the end of every single year?
Great question, yes. So the health savings account is your account that you take with you for your life. You have it. You own that account once you leave wherever you are. You can actually roll it into a new HSA plan. And some people use it as a savings vehicle, so they may save that pre-tax money in there and then use it to pay expenses, 20 years later. So it's definitely a kind of a savings vehicle, something you hold on to. It's not a use it or lose it type account either. So they've definitely become more popular for that reason. Yep.
So then can you transfer the money that's in there for health purposes to like paying your rent or something like that?
So you can't do that. No, you have to use, you'd pay taxes on it if you did. Yeah, if you wanted to maintain that tax-free benefit, then you'd have to use it for those expenses. Yeah. But it's also vision, dental, there's other things other than just like a copay from your doctor's office that you can use it for. There's a wide variety of expenses that are eligible.
And as a follow-up to
Yeah.
that, like when like you would become like elderly, like you can use it for like elder care. Right?
Yeah, you can use it for, what I know for sure is you can use it for Medicare premiums. And there might be components of it that you can use, for elder care as well. Yes.
Is it transferable to like dependents, or is it like you as an individual, like it's your HSA account for like your own personal use, or like?
That's a good question. I think there may be beneficiaries tied to the account, but I'm not sure. If you are covered if you have dependents that you're covering, you can use it to pay your dependents' expenses.
Gotcha. Okay.
So you can do that, yeah. Any other questions on the HSA?
I
Okay.
guess, or I'm sorry, I have a
Yeah,
question.
no.
I guess like what does the employee matching or employer matching for the HSA look like?
What is it typically?
Or like I know that like or I assume it's like similar to like retirement where they'll like match contributions, but
So every organization does it differently. So there's not kind of a standard formula. Some organizations will provide half of the deductible, and some organizations will give it to you on January 1, so you have it in your account the whole year. Other organizations will say, you know what, we'll give you half of your deductible, but we're going to spread it out across the course of the year. So every place is different, and some organizations don't provide a contribution, so they just allow the employees to do it on a pre-tax basis. Yes?
With the health savings account, so part of your paycheck is going into this account, correct?
If you wanted to, it's voluntary.
So then if you weren't having any money go into it, then what money would be there?
So then the only money that, if the organization you work for contributed to it, you would have that money. If they don't, and then you choose not to, you just would not have an HSA account. You would just be, if you had to meet the deductible or pay a copay, you would just be using your own money. You wouldn't have that account. So it's a voluntary, if you're eligible for an HSA plan based on the plan that you elect, and it's only tied to high deductible plans too. So you can't be in like an HMO plan with no deductible and enroll in a HSA. You can enroll in an FSA, but that's different. So you have the choice whether or not you want to contribute to it.
So it's completely separate from like hitting that deductible to then when your health insurance will like kick in?
Yeah, it's a separate account, so it's kind of like this bucket of money that you decide how much you want to contribute to. You can use it to hit the deductible or not. You can just pay your deductible out of pocket, and you can save that money in your account and let it grow. You can actually invest it once it gets over a certain dollar threshold. Yep. So there's a lot you can do with it. Great. Okay, so perks and other benefits. Let's see. Okay, so other things to think about as you're kind of evaluating benefits that are offered at different organizations. We put it in some different buckets for you to just think through. One is financial well-being. So there's a lot of organizations out there that will offer student loan, either either they'll help with the cost of student loans, or they'll provide a service that helps you manage your student loans and apply for the loan forgiveness, and they help you kind of manage that budgeting piece and make sure that you're really, utilizing all that's available to you. We also, some organizations offer tuition reimbursement, so that's always something to ask about. Free retirement planning, so there's often, either through the 401k or through the 403b plan, there might be financial advisors available that you can work with and speak with. So that's always something to look at. A lot of organizations will offer budget planning seminars, events, people to help with that. That's a big thing. And then when you look at, your work schedule and paid time off. So obviously a lot's changed in the past 2 years with work schedules and hybrid and remote. And so, that's something to kind of think about what would be your preference there. And now I feel like there's a lot more flexibility within a lot of organizations for hybrid or remote options. You also want to check out how many vacation days or paid time off days. So some organizations have vacation, sick, and personal. Other organizations lump that all into one bank, and it's called PTO time. And so you can use it for anything, really. So it's kind of, you want to check out to see how many days you have. Does it increase if you're there longer? Do you get more days? And then sometimes organizations will have community service days or volunteer days where you can take the day off to do a volunteer event, and you get paid for it without having to use your vacation time. Parental leave is another thing to look into. So you can kind of talk through how much time is paid off. There's often a lot of services available for work-life balance and kind of navigating leave and navigating starting families and that kind of thing.
Sorry, can you talk more about what that would be? Like an example of what that
For which one? The concierge
Yeah.
one? So there are, some of it is through an employee assistance program. And so the employee assistance program can kind of help you find resources for whatever kind of situation you might, need it for. So they could help with finding childcare or elder care, something of that nature. The concierge services, so some of the EAPs are like pretty customized. They'll do all the work for you. So if you had to find daycare, for example, they would go and call local daycare companies and find out if there's space and do all of that work for you. So that's just one example of how they can help. Yes?
I have a question going back to the PTOs.
Yeah.
If your employer splits them up into vacation, sick, and personal days,
Mhm.
can you still kind of reallocate those under the table? Like, do they care if you use a sick day to go home to visit your parents, like anything like that?
Yeah, typically there are definitely policies around when it's appropriate to use sick and vacation time. So yeah, there's typically sick time really defined normally fairly clearly in policies and what you can use it for, because some companies will let you use it to take a child to a doctor's appointment, so it might not just be for yourself being sick. It might be a little broader, but typically you can't interchange sick and vacation. You can't use your sick time to go on a trip, to Disney World or something, but there's normally some kind of provision there that helps to make it clear. Good question. Any other questions on this case? Okay. Yes.
I guess I've seen more colloquially that unlimited PTO is becoming more and more common. So what's that like? Can you just talk about that a little bit?
No, that's so I think some organizations do have that. They don't put a limit on the PTO time, and I think it probably has to do just kind of with the work ethic of the organization and how employees work with their managers, and they've kind of realized there's not really a need to have this bank of time because people are taking the time they need to go on vacation, the time they feel like they have time if they're not feeling well that they can be home. So yeah, I mean, it's a different, there's lots of different ways that organizations structure their time off for sure. And so it's worth, asking about, I think, for sure, and making sure you understand it. So once you've accepted an offer, it's really important to make sure you understand that part. How do I go about using a day? Is there a rule like where I need to provide 2 weeks of notice if I'm going to take vacation time? So all of that, that's all important kind of questions, and it's different everywhere, so it's a good thing to ask about.
Sorry, I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, but
No.
so I know that we talked a lot about like healthcare coverage, but what about like dental care and eye exams and things?
I know, you're right. I only have a little bit on the dental and vision. So for dental, most organizations will offer kind of standard dental plans that cover cleanings 2 times a year and, fillings and that kind of thing. There's typically, 1 or 2 choices for dental care. There's not normally a lot of plans to choose from. You want to make sure that whatever plan you're electing has a broad network of dentists and that your dentist is in their network. That's important, or at least you can find multiple dentists near you that are in the network. And the cost for it is pre-tax also typically, so you can pay those premiums on a pre-tax basis. So the dental care is a little bit more standard, like it's just not that complex. The limits of how much you can use under dental coverage are definitely different by plan. So that's something to consider. And then vision care, sometimes that's an optional benefit that employers offer. And if you wear glasses or contacts, it tends to be definitely helpful to have that coverage because you're going to get some kind of benefit from it if you're using it every year. Most health insurance plans cover an eye exam once a year. But some folks need more than that, and those premiums most of the time can be also pre-tax.
Okay.
Yes.
When you say it's covered, is that fully covered or you still have a copay?
You typically still have a copay. Yeah. It's just when you I think one of the big takeaways is to look at what your projected kind of out-of-pocket expense would be for copays, those kinds of things, and then compare that to what you're paying or add that to what you're paying in premiums for the full year. And that way you can kind of figure out, well, if I spend $400 on my contacts, but with this plan I'm only spending $200, at least you're saving $200. It may not cover the whole cost, but it will likely cover a lot of it. Great. Okay, so life and disability coverage. Life insurance protects against, if something were to happen. Most of the life insurance policies that organizations offer to employees are term life insurance benefits. So they're only paid out if the employee passes away. Oftentimes, the organization will pay the premium for basic life insurance, and so those coverage amounts may vary, but it could be anywhere from 1 times your annual salary to maybe 2 times your annual salary. So a lot of times organizations will pay the cost for basic life insurance, and then they'll give you the option to buy supplemental. So, and that would just increase, you'd pay a premium, and that would increase the amount of coverage that you have for life insurance. And then disability is really kind of complex and varies by organization, it varies by state. So it's something that you would want to talk to your benefits team about. There's certain state policies that cover certain leaves, and then there's also what the organization might offer, short-term and long-term disability insurance. So it's really kind of different everywhere, and there's different combinations of disability coverage that you can elect. Or that you may be automatically covered for. Any questions there? Okay. And then, let's see. So some additional voluntary, so these are typically employee paid benefits, not always, but typically. So group home and auto insurance. So there's, Liberty Mutual is an example where a lot of times you can get discounted rates through your employer by working through your employer and going to one of those carriers. So that would be for like car insurance or renter's insurance or home insurance. Discount programs. So there are certain programs out there where they provide discounts for movie tickets or, you know, to go to the museums. So there's just, that's kind of a, typically you don't pay for the discount program, you're just able to access it and then you can use the discounts. Pet insurance is another one that's becoming very popular. And then there's some voluntary products that some organizations offer for life insurance we talked about, but disability. Identity theft protection, there's typically some kind of coverage that's offered at no cost, and then there might be an optional benefit that you could buy too. Legal plans, same thing. The organization might have a voluntary legal plan. Those are helpful for creating wills or trusts. They're also helpful if you think you might buy land, buy a property, so for real estate matters, those kinds of things, but they cover quite a bit, the voluntary legal plans. And then we talked about the HSA. The FSA is another pre-tax benefit, similar to the HSA, except for that you have to use it before the end of the plan year, like the calendar year. And if you don't spend it within that certain period of time, you lose the money that's in your bank. And typically employers don't, it's normally employee funded directly. And again, it's voluntary. And then accident, critical illness, dental and vision we talked about. Those are just some other additional benefits that may be offered that you can kind of take a look at premiums and decide whether or not it makes sense. Yes?
And kind of for like all of these, you would go through kind of like the benefits people associated with the organization.
Yeah,
Talk to.
exactly, yeah. Great. Okay. Oh, sorry. Yes.
With like FSA versus HSA, is it usually like you're only offered one or the other? Because I guess like I'm having trouble understanding why anyone would pick an FSA over an HSA.
Yeah. So the HSA, you can only, not all organizations offer an HSA, and you can only enroll in it if you're in a high deductible plan. So if you decide to go into the HMO plan or another plan that's not a high deductible plan, then you may want to at least be able to contribute pre-tax money to pay for your out-of-pocket co-pays, deductibles, vision care, all of that. If there's a dental, even out-of-pocket dental. So that's why FSAs have been around a long time, and a lot of people still use them if they're not eligible for the HSA. So there's also a limited purpose FSA that complicates things, but that you can use with a HSA plan. You can only use it for dental and vision expenses. So if you wanted to put aside you wanted to max out your HSA, and then you wanted to put even more aside for just vision and dental, you could do a limited purpose FSA. So it's a little complicated, and that's why you really have to look at the plans that you're offered and then pick which one makes the most sense. Yeah. Great. Okay, so retirement benefits. So the retirement benefits really allows you to save money for retirement years when you're not going to be getting a salary from an employer. And the government has kind of created a variety of different options depending on where you work. When you're looking at offers or when you start a new job, you're going to learn about what type of retirement plan they offer. And so it could be a 401k, it could be a 403b if you're in a nonprofit. There's also 457, so there's a number of different retirement programs out there. The most common are 401ks and 403bs. And so, you'll kind of, I'm not sure if there's another slide on this one. Okay, yeah. So just to give a little overview on retirement plan terms, eligibility is when you ask about when am I eligible to start contributing. That means when can I start contributing my own money into the retirement plan. And so sometimes it's day one, sometimes it's the first of the month after you start. Sometimes there's a longer waiting period, but that's a good thing to ask. how much you can save. So there are federal limits that the IRS sets every year that says how much you can contribute for the calendar year under the plan. So for this year, it's $20,500 if you're under the age of 50. And then automatic enrollment increase. So this is something that's important to kind of keep an eye out for. Some employers have a provision in their plan where they're going to automatically set you up at a contribution rate. So they may set you up for like a 3% contribution rate, let's say. They'll give a period of time, typically, where you can opt out of that and say, I don't want to do that. But if you don't take advantage of, if you don't want to contribute and you don't respond to that piece, they're going to automatically start taking the contribution out. And there's also auto increase. So they might start folks out at 3%, and then each year they might increase the percentage amount by 1%. And the whole purpose is really to kind of encourage people to save and start early and kind of start right away. Because it's one of those things that if you don't, when you're hired, there's so much you're thinking about, you're learning so much, you could miss that opportunity. And then if you don't think about it until a couple years later, you've missed this opportunity to be able to contribute. But just something to be aware of, and there'll be communications about that if that's set up. It's not everywhere, but a lot of organizations do that. Okay, so the tax advantages for these savings accounts, for these retirement accounts, pre-tax, similar to what we were talking about before for the medical. So it allows you to put aside contributions before taxes. You don't pay any taxes on them. Something to think about is that if you contribute on a pre-tax basis, when you do take your money out, everything in the account, including your contributions and any earnings, are taxed. So at some point, they're going to be taxed. And so if you do it pre-tax, you're going to be taxed whenever you take the money out of the plan. Some plans offer a Roth option, and Roth means that you're paying taxes on the contributions right away as you're contributing the contributions into the account. So you're paying them now so that when you go to take your money out when you retire, you're not subject to taxes. So all the money you've put aside and then any earnings on that is tax-free because you already paid the taxes on it. There's a couple provisions. You have to have the account open for 5 years and be 59 and a half in order to be eligible for this tax-free benefit under the Roth. So this is where financial advisors are able to kind of come in and help you figure out what the right scenario would be, but I wanted to just make sure you're aware of the different options. Yes?
Okay, so a question I have is between like the Roth IRA and I guess like the normal one, is when you do, hold on, let me see something.
Yeah.
When you do the Roth IRA, are you paying higher taxes because your income would be higher in that moment versus when you're doing the regular one? Isn't your income lower because you're already getting like presumably
Right.
getting a lower salary? Or I guess do you have to like kind of bank now on like how rich you think you're going to be like over the course of your career?
Yeah, it's hard. No, you're right. It's hard to kind of think through, and it's true. You'd be paying more in taxes now. That's right, because that money is considered your income if you do the Roth, and then if you do the pre-tax, you would pay less taxes now. I think what some folks have said is, you think about what your tax rate is now compared to what your tax rate would be, years from now. It'll probably be higher, so, but I can't say for sure, but that's the thought process is, if you're in a lower tax bracket now, paying the taxes now may make more sense than paying them when you're in a higher tax bracket later. Yes.
Wait, so is this Roth different from the Roth IRA?
Yes.
Okay, so with Roth IRAs, I thought you weren't taxed with the money that you
Yeah,
paid.
no, that's right. Roth, well, I don't deal with Roth IRAs,
Okay.
so I don't know a lot about Roth IRAs. I'm really just talking about the Roth 401k or the Roth 403b, and it's
Okay.
confusing because it does get.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
So like, for example, like a 401k, it could either be a Roth 401k or a pre-tax 401k.
Right.
So you get to decide which way you want to go.
Typically, yeah, if the organization offers the Roth option.
Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, go ahead.
Or, yeah, I guess just like a follow-up question to that, why wouldn't an organization offer a Roth option? Like, does an organization have to pay to be able to provide a Roth option?
No, it's really, well, I guess there's a couple things. The Roth option hasn't been around for that long. It's probably, I don't know, I want to say maybe 10 or 15 years ago where they allowed the Roth. So some organizations just haven't kind of caught up with that provision. It does complicate things from an administrative standpoint though, too. So if the organization, is limited in their technology, capabilities, those kinds of things, they may not have, because you have to have separate buckets for each, contribution has to be really well managed. So that could be the other alternative. I think probably now most organizations do offer it, but that would be why they might not. Kind of like the auto enrollment. I mean, auto enrollment's been around for probably maybe at least 10 years, I would say, but not every organization has adopted that. Yes.
Can you switch, say you start out with a low income at postgrad,
Yeah.
and then you're kind of making more money.
Right.
Can you switch
Yeah.
in the middle, or do you have are you only allowed to switch when you get a new employer? How does that work?
No, so you would want to check with your employer rules on the plan, because every employer is different in the frequency in which you can make changes, but oftentimes you can change your contribution rate multiple times throughout the year, so you might even change it within 1 year. I would say the minimum would be that you could change your contribution rate once a year, but more likely you could change it more often than that. And so you could increase it, you could change from pre-tax to Roth.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you could do that as well. Yeah, so there's definitely flexibility there.
Kelly, I just want to let you know we're at 7:06.
Okay. Oh, nice. Yeah. Sorry.
Lots of good questions.
Totally. Yeah.
If there's more slides, I can always ask after.
Okay. Sure. I know. I don't know how many more slides are there.
Three.
Three.
So maybe we want to just roll through those quickly?
Yeah. Is that okay?
Sure.
Totally. Okay. And then I'll stick around for any questions.
Oh, I like 4 slides.
Okay, so matching, employer matching is, again, this is something you would find out. Every plan is different, every organization is different, but you would want to figure out if there is a match, which means that if you may need to contribute 3% to get the organization's full match. So they may say, we're contributing 50% of the first 3% that you contribute. So in that scenario, if you wanted to obtain the maximum match, you'd want to contribute at least 3% into the plan. Vesting is, some organizations have a vesting schedule. So vesting means whether or not you fully kind of own those contributions and you're taking them with you. Any contributions you make to a plan is 100% vested. You would always be able to take your own contributions with you if you left your employer. But any employer contributions, there may or may not be a vesting schedule, so you'd want to check that. So it may be that you have to stay with the organization for 5 years, and if you do, then you're 100% vested and you can take all of the contributions you received from the employer with you. So that varies, by plan and something to check into. And then loans are often available through 403B or 401K plans. And this is where you could take a loan from your account. Okay, so compensation terms to know. So we're kind of switching gears to compensation, and again, I'll run through it quickly. But there's different types of roles, and some roles are paid on an hourly basis, and if they are, they're considered non-exempt, which really essentially means that you're eligible for overtime pay if you work over 40 hours. Other roles are salary pay, so you receive a set amount each pay period. It's fixed. You're not putting in your hours, and it's exempt, which means you're not eligible for overtime. So it's always important when you're looking at the offer to kind of figure out whether you're exempt or non-exempt. Bonus pay, so some roles are out. Sometimes there's bonus programs in organizations. Sometimes there are, sometimes it's built into the merit process. Sometimes it's sales or incentive based. So that's always a good question to ask. And I'm sorry, we have incentive pay separately. So that would be like, meeting targets, sales, marketing roles, there might be incentives for hitting certain targets that you might receive. So that's kind of a brief summary on the comp. And then things to consider for employment, for any offer that you might receive. Is it a fixed role? So is it a term role, meaning like this role is going to be from July 1 through June 30th of the following year? Or is it, for an indefinite period of time? Is it paid hourly or salaried? We just talked about that. What's the standard work week? That's a fair question to ask. Most often it's 40 hours. Is the role benefits eligible? They're probably going to share that kind of information when they provide an offer. The bonus or incentive pay, the annual review process. So is there a process where there's a performance review? Is there an annual merit process? Those are all kind of good questions. And then what's the typical growth path for somebody in the role? So, if you're looking to grow, they can kind of talk a little bit about that. And if you receive an offer, it's okay to say, I need some time, I'd like some time to think it through. Can you let me know when you might need an answer? That's okay to do. You don't have to feel like you have to answer it right on the spot. Because you do want to take some time to think about it and look at what they're offering and look at the benefits and all of that. If you do think the offer is too low, you could say something like, I was hoping for a different range, I was expecting that it would be paid higher. Normally, you're kind of clear on what the range is, though, now. There's a lot more transparency out there at the moment, so that you should be fairly clear on what the salary range is for the role that you're applying to, but that could certainly come up, though, in a conversation if you're providing an offer. Okay. All right.